Good evening and welcome to our weekly book study here at New Covenant House. We are reading Christian Anarchism by Alexander Christianopoulos, who wrote it as his doctoral thesis a little over 10 years ago. And we are up to beginning chapter 6 now. This is actually a book about Christian anarchist theory or Christian anarchist thought. But this chapter is about practice. And he says that alone could be an entire book all by itself. So we're just kind of like skimming a little bit up on the surface here in chapter 6. But there are lots of footnotes in the chapter for anyone who wants to dig into that deeper. So with that said, we can just dig into it. The chapter is divided into two main sections. The first one is pre-modern. He calls it pre-modern, and then the other one he calls it modern. But the boundary between the two is kind of fluent a little bit. But I think the second part of the modern time is when writers have been recognized that Christian anarchists, that's what they're talking about. But in the first part is there was no the term anarchist hasn't been invented until like the mid to late 1800s. So anything that was before that, you have to recognize the anarchism based on what's happening, the expression, not on the how they identify themselves. So, and because the Christian anarchists refer to some examples way back, then we recognize those as anarchists as well, even though there was no such thing as anarchism by that time, in those times. And you can, they're saying that you can think of it as tentative illustrations of elements of the line of thinking outlined in chapter 1 to 5, rather than as a conclusive proof of its vindication. Because, there's no place on earth where Christian anarchism has become the way that you live. Really, it has not been completely implemented anywhere at this point, and there's some indication that it never will. It will always be on the margins of society, he says. Because every place on the planet is claimed by somebody. Last thing I heard was that Canada and Denmark had finally agreed on a treaty regarding one little rock in the Arctic Ocean that they both claimed as theirs. But that was apparently the last place on Earth that nobody has claimed as anybody, that doesn't belong to anybody. And this book is over 10 years old, and there's not much talk about who owns the moon in those days, but now there is. Now that people are beginning to think about colonizing the moon and extracting resources from it. So at some point or another, somebody's going to claim it as theirs, or claim part of it as theirs. So that's yet to be seen, what's going on with that. So these examples here can just be seen as inspiration for us, a Christian anarchist society. It's not meant as evidence of what it's going to be like, because it has never been done in practice before. But it will always be a critique of the state, will always be there, even if it's just a subset of society, really. So we talked a little bit about already the two sections in the chapter. Yeah, so the second section, the modern time, came after the first attempts to articulate in writing what amounts to explicitly Christian anarchist thoughts. So anything before that is kind of like just the evidence on what it looks like. You can't. There's nobody really can claim that it's anarchism before then. In the pre-modern time, there's the early Christians, and we're going to be talking about the time from the first church and up until about Constantine tonight. And the next time we're going to, because there's going to be a big gap between the fall of Rome in 476 AD and up to the Reformation in the 16th century. So, but then next time we're going to look at what's happening pre-Reformation in the Middle Ages, and then what's happening during the Reformation as well. That's going to be next time. But tonight, it's just going to be about the early church and the Constantinian deception. So let's dig into that. Christian anarchists admire the political organization of the early church, early Christian church. So that's why they're writing about it, but they can't claim that it's anarchist because there was no such thing as that time already. But they do refer to several church fathers. Some are called Origen, Tertullian, Clement, and Lactantius, and a few others. Those are the earliest. Those are the earliest evidence of anything that kind of like documents what the early church was like. So those reports are really important. The early church did take Jesus' Sermon on the Mount quite literally and strove to live up to its revolutionary commandments. That's what we get out of those writers. Yeah. And then the way to describe it is that the early church was a community of love and care. It was based on hospitality but not liturgy. There was no liturgy. Everything was based on taking care of one another. It was this communal attitude of love and sacrifice which set Christians apart and persuaded others to convert and join the church. So there was no evangelism at that time either, like we saw in chapter 5, where they're saying that it is our example in daily life that will convince other people that this is the way, not the preaching and the teaching. But another thing that set the Christians apart from the rest of the people was their refusal to worship and obey anybody other than God. The emperors of Rome, Caesar, demanded that they worshipped him, but they refused. And for that, they were savagely persecuted. But this persecution did not solve the problem. In fact, it made it worse. It not only did persecution not succeed in weakening the church, but the death of its martyrs actually reaffirmed the Christian message. So, and somewhere they say that the seed of the church were indeed the blood of its martyrs. So the more the Romans persecuted the Christians, the more Christians there were and more entrenched they became. And while they were there, they refused to take administrative office or to act as judges or to serve in the military. They practiced uncompromising pacifism and criticism of the military service. They were hostile to political power and regarded it as bad. So they saw the Romans saw them as a subversive, viewed by the Romans authorities as subversive to social order. And then Constantine came along. Constantine's temptation was precisely a way to deal with this subversive movement by corrupting its very core. So the strategy of Constantine was not to pursue them pursue the persecutions, because he saw that it didn't work. The Christians got more entrenched. They gained in numbers. They gained in power. So what he did was he made Christianity the official religion of Rome. And we have a parallel to that actually in Harold Bluetooth, who lived in Denmark in the late 900s, and he had just united Norway and Denmark, so there was now just one king for all of that area. But he saw that political powers down in south in Europe were gaining strength, and he knew that he couldn't beat them if they decided to invade Scandinavia. So, and in the meantime, the Catholic Church, has also gained power, and there was this very powerful alliance between Charlemagne and the Church, and so Harold simply decided that we're going to make Denmark and Norway Christian, and sort of kind of like joined the church instead of trying to fight it. So and that way he could remain in power, which is kind of like a little bit like what Constantine did here. Christians loved and cared for each other. They subjected themselves to the state's punishment for any necessary civil disobedience. We said that already. There's nothing new in that. Constantine's officially adopted it, and in so doing trapped the church, which readily let itself be trapped, being largely led at this time by hierarchy drawn from the aristocracy. So we are now a far cry from the early church, where everyone was more or less equal. Now there's a hierarchy installed in the church. The church then moderated its radical stance on issues like military service, tempted as it was by opportunities presented by political power. So the temptation of Constantine is power. He's dangling in front of them, and they took it. After Constantine, the early church's example of Christian anarchism witness was deeply corrupted. And then came the barbarian invasion in 476 AD, and Christian pacifism was submerged for nearly a millennium. So there is now no mention of Christian anarchism from this time around 500 up until the Reformation, basically. There is some talk about pre-Reformation, and we're going to talk about that next week with Silsiki and some other movements that started in the Middle Ages, but before the actual Reformation. So that's pretty much all I have tonight, and then I'm going to see you all next week. Thank you for coming.